we want to get going. I'm Becky Hope, and thank you for coming today.
Oh, as you'll all discover, we have timing issues, so we are going to get started, and I'm rearranging my presentation here, as you will see. So we're here to talk about actually a brand new book called Kuleana. Kuleana is Hawaiian for responsibility. This is subtitled A Story of Family, Land, and Legacy in Old Hawaii. And it's by Sarah Kehaulani Gu, and I'll tell you more about her in a little bit. But let me just begin where Sarah begins in her book, just to give you an idea of her writing and the beauty of this work. Along the rugged shores of Maui's east coast, bright blue waters crash into the black rock coastline that, from above, frames the rainforest like a postcard of paradise. A light breeze smells like the wild guava trees that grow abundantly on the island, mixed with salty air whipped up from the ocean, a perfume found only here in the middle of the Pacific. And around every bend in the winding road that moves through here, a breathtaking waterfall spills from the cliffs above, sometimes into a natural swimming hole that tempts you to stop by and take a cool dip. This is one of the last remaining places of the real Hawaii, untouched by international hotels or tacky bus tours. These are my family's ancestral Hawaiian homes. So there are four themes that I will eventually talk about, but we're going to rearrange them. I want to talk about Sarah's professional journey, and we'll come back to that. Sarah's ancestral journey, because the heart of this book is the search for her ancestry, and we'll talk a lot more about that. Loss of native Hawaiian lands and culture, and then finally, the meaning of kuleana, or responsibility. So we're going to go past her professional journey and go right to her ancestral journey. The book, this is a family tree of the Kahanu family, which is Sarah's ancestral family. It goes back many generations, back essentially to 1848, when King Kamehameha III gave a piece of property to the Kahanu family. And this is the family tree. The original 990 acres has been divided many, many times, as you can imagine, as the generations. Some of those pieces of property were sold, were developed, some are still owned. But Sarah's immediate family, her father, and I think he's one of 7, they still own 90 acres in Hana on the island of Maui. Just to give you a little bit of a sense, those of you who've all seen pictures from Niihau, the small island at the far west, to the big island of Hawaii. Sarah's property is right here on Maui. Maui is a relatively small island. I put Lahaina on here at the far western edge because that's the town that most everybody heard of 2 years ago when it was essentially destroyed in a matter of hours by a wildfire. It is, thank heavens, being rebuilt and reviving. But at the other end of the island is Hana. How many of you have ever been to and taken the infamous road to Hana? I see lots of hands. So this is where the family property is in Hana, on the island of Maui. One piece of the property, and we'll talk more about this, is the Pi'ilani Hale Heiau. But let's get into this just a little bit. Perched along the coastline sits an enormous native Hawaiian temple called the Heiau, made of rocks meticulously stacked nearly 4 stories high. The Heiau is a remnant of the ancient Hawaiian religion and culture that thrived here centuries ago. More than 90 acres of this land, from the road to the sea, now worth many millions of dollars, are still owned by my family, the Kahanu family. And for the most part, the land has remained exactly as it was some 175 years ago, raw, undeveloped, wild. It's overgrown with thick hollow trees whose broomstick-like roots stand high above the ground and whose thin, sharp leaves serve as nature's barbed wire fence, keeping out curious hikers. Spindly papaya trees peep up in the distance, serving up their yellow fruit
for the birds that chirp loudly but can't be seen. A single dirt road which floods several times a year after sudden bursts of thunderstorms divides the land parcels belonging to my grandma, our family, her descendants, my aunties and uncles and cousins. I have a piece that maybe I'll read later that describes more about what a heiau is, but let's move past that. In our family, my grandma and other elders always talked about our kuleana, or responsibility, for the special land on Maui that King Kamehameha III had granted to us to take care of. But why us? Nearly 2 centuries after a royal land grant, several forces have made our family's ability to hold on to this land much harder. Given the history of colonialism and pressures of capitalism, some would say it's just a matter of time before we're forced to give up the last remaining acres of it. And in 2019, we were confronted with that moment. It started with an email from my father Monday night after I put the kids to bed. Sarah, he said, the Hana property's taxes went up 500%. If we can't find a way to pay, then the trust funds left by her grandmother, Sarah's grandmother, will be depleted in 7 years, and we may be forced to sell it. This is how Hawaiians are losing their birthright lands. Dad. Aside from all the tangled East-West heritage inside of me, Sarah struggles with her identity as a Hawaiian. She has never she was born and lived mostly on the East Coast, now lives outside of Washington, D.C. as a professional journalist. But she has ancestry straight back to the ancient Hawaiians, but she struggles with that. Aside from all the tangled East-West heritage inside me, there's one small side, the Native Hawaiian side, that I wrestled with most. It spoke loudest of all inside of me because it left behind not just a story and a culture that went back hundreds of years, but a physical, actual place. As I sat with that email open in front of me, that voice I heard all these years calling me to Hawaii was now screaming like a five-alarm fire. If we lost the land, I'd lose not only my connection to Hawaii, but I'd never be able to share that with my children and their children. I saw this not just as a danger of losing connection to a place, but more to the end of a family legacy forever. The possibility of losing Grandma's land suddenly pushed all those nagging questions to the front and center of my life. It forced me to confront an uncomfortable question about my place in the culture and the lineage. Was I Kanaka Moli, which is Native Hawaiian, or Malahini, which is just simply a visitor? And I'm lost somewhere in between, she says. When she was 9 years old, it was the first time she visited this property owned by the family, and this is the story of when they first arrived in Hana. So this is the beginning of her journey when she's 9. Out of nowhere, a small white truck pulled up next to us and parked. The driver's side door cracked open. A small tan man with thick brown square framed glasses looked out and smiled at us. "Hey," he shouted. "Sarah, this is your Uncle Take," Dad said, walking toward the man, meeting him with a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Aloha," he said, reaching out for a hug. "I am Uncle, your grandma's brother." "You folks want to go down heiau?" Uncle Take asked, now looking more serious and raising his eyebrows around his thick framed glasses he kept pushed back up on his nose. We walked several minutes in the quiet. With each step, I began to feel as though we were pushing further into the jungle and away from where civilization could hear us or know where we were. I listened carefully to the tone of my dad's voice for any sign that he might be worried, but his voice never left the casual reunion tone as he bantered with Uncle Take. Then we stepped and looked up. First, it appeared like an enormous tidal wave of black, emerging above the thick curtain of green jungle several stories tall. Only when we got closer, this temple, or heiau, as the Hawaiians call it, revealed itself like a mysterious man-made mountain high above our heads. So that's the beginning when she was 9 years old, and then as things progressed, Uncle Take becomes a very important part of her journey to find out about her family's history. Uncle Take, who was the last member of the family, as he said, her grandma's brother, had a box full of documents, including the original signed document by King Kamehameha in 1848 that ceded the land to the family. So the book goes into a great deal about her search, but I'm going to jump then. Near the end of her search, she found a professor at the University of Hawaii who was a historian, a historian of native Hawaii, and her name was Lilikala Kamaele Hiva. It was Sunday afternoon, and the humidity was rising on the north and west side of Oahu when I knocked on Lilikala's screen door. When I read her book about the Mahele, the great Mahele, was in the time of King Kamehameha in the mid-1800s, Kamehameha III, when he ceded land, Mahele is to distribute, he distributed land to native Hawaiians all over the Hawaiian Islands with the hopes that the lands would stay in the hands of native Hawaiians. That was the hope for the great Mahele. It never turned out to be that way for many, many reasons. But she says, when I read her book about the Mahele, native lands and foreign desires, I was delighted to find my ancestor's name in the index. I had been searching for more information about how Kahanu had received land from King Kamehameha III in 1848, and after some online searching, had found her book and promptly devoured it. So what brings you to Washington, she asked while checking me out. I was a stranger who arrived on her doorstep after me emailing her. I'm free on Saturday, she replied. I was honored to be invited. She invited me into her home. Well, I've been trying to do some family research. You see, our family, our grandma, has land on Maui, and I've been able to find the award in the Mahele and trace through the generations to what we have now. My ancestor, Kahanu, is included in your book. I thought you might be able to help me understand it all a little better. As I talked, Lilikala picked up some wet towels sitting on the laundry bin, wrung them out, and began hanging them up to dry in the clothesline. Aha, so what do you want to know about Kahanu? Well, I want to know who he was. I want to know why he got this land in the first place. The story is that he was a chief who helped Kamehameha, and also this land included the Piilani Hale Heiau, the largest heiau in Maui. Some say the largest in all of Polynesia. So why would our family receive this place, this very special historic heiau? Her eyebrows rose when I mentioned the heiau, and I could tell she was familiar with it. Of course she was. Few people I've met outside of Hana or my family members know about it, even though it's now open to the public. But she's a Hawaiian historian, one of the most distinguished of her name. And this final story I'll tell about Sarah's search for her ancestry is one that she will tell you became very important to her. So this professor, this historian, asked her, you're looking for your family genealogy? I nodded, Sarah said. You should pray to them and ask them for permission, and they will open doors for you. They will find you documents. They'll find all kinds of stuff for you, I promise. I tell my students that because that's what happened, she said. I sat speechless. I was expecting an academic explanation, a suggestion about how I could better go about my research or stop at a particular Oahu library. What I didn't expect was spiritual advice. Pray to my ancestors? I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. So the plan this morning was for me to continue for another 15 minutes with some of the other things I want to talk about. However, you probably noticed we do have a special guest here, so I'm going to stop sharing and welcome Sarah. Aloha, mahalo nui loha for your beautiful work.
Oh, aloha to you, Roger, and to all of your guests there. I can't see you, but very excited to speak with you today. Just thank you for your interest in my book. And by the way, I thought you did a great impression of my Uncle Take.
Your grandma's brother.
I'll have to bring you in for the next audiobook version.
Okay, all right. So do you want to say a few words, or would you like to at some point, I would like you to comment about that last piece that I wrote about praying to your ancestors, and because I know you commented later in the book how you really finally decided that that really is true. That was true for you.
It was, thank you. Yeah, I think, where to start? First of all, it sounds like there's a number of people in your audience who've been to Hawaii or at least familiar with it, and even Maui and Hana is a very special place, as you know. And, as someone who grew up in California and then, really spent my whole life on the US continent, but visited Hawaii many times, I felt my whole life that there was a bigger story to tell. I felt that the stories that most Americans know about Hawaii were written by Hollywood or written by the tourism industry and didn't really connect with the real Hawaii that my family knew, that I knew, that was familiar to me, that was much more rich in culture, that had, some painful stories to tell about colonialism and its impact on our people. And in a way, I always felt that was a strange disconnect that Hawaii is, the youngest state to be part of the United States, and yet I think its history is the one we know least about. At least I never learned about it in school, and I searched to learn more about it as I've grown, and even as a young kid. You spoke about the heiau, and I remember visiting it as a child, as you described. It was covered in the jungle at that time. And then I had so many questions about what my eyes were seeing. That structure is so bizarre and mysterious and intriguing and full of secrets and history. I yearned to know more about it, and I naively thought when I returned to my local public library in California that I could find a book about heiaus that would explain to me what it was. And I'm sure you can imagine they didn't exist on that shelf. And you sitting there at a public library today, I think, is an interesting full circle moment to be telling you the story now. But I also that intrigued me about why is it that I'm learning in school about ancient people of Egypt and the Aztecs in the Americas, but I don't know anything about the people where I'm from. So this book took me about 10, 15 years to research, report, and put together. That conversation with Lily Kala was about 12 years ago, but it took me this long to really get out there the story I felt needed to be on the shelf.
Thank you. To even more recently, how many, let me ask, I know you can't see the audience, but I'll report to you. My wife and I were in the islands a month or so ago. How many of you know that there was a hurricane headed straight for the islands about a month ago? A surprising number, actually, because a lot of people don't realize that Hurricane Kiko was headed straight for the islands and it had curved north. But it's amazing, what would you say, even today, Sarah, that there isn't much reporting about Hawaii.
Yes, I think that's true. I think it's, and as a journalist, I know that to be especially true. It's kind of, unfortunately, like a lot of things where it's expensive to get journalists there, it's expensive to report from there, and then I think then you're not really getting a full picture except when tragedy strikes. So,
like Lahaina.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Last time.
So I'll ask if there's some questions from the audience, but let me ask you first about some of the highs and lows of this journey. I know you've talked about this, I've heard you talk about this. I know certainly the death of your grandmother and of Uncle Take were really painful experiences, but other times when you were feeling, do you ever feel like giving up? Or times when you were just on the highest highs?
Well, I think, I think as a journalist, I initially thought that I didn't want to write a story about my own family. I wanted to maybe see if I could tell this story just as a story about land, a story about the heiau, a story that was more big picture. But I think once we got this property tax hike that you read about, I felt like my story was the Hawaiian people's story. My family's story was their experience with land loss. And that discovery that, my grandmother's, 10-acre plot of land, along with my other relatives' other acreage left, another 80 acres, once was 990 acres. I mean, the story of what happened to that land, I realized, was the story of what happened to the Hawaiian people, and I thought needed to be told. But the second part, as you talk about, was my own journey to get there and reckon with what this land means to me, and a woman who's grown up in a very capitalist, culture and mindset. I used to be the real estate editor of the Washington Post. In fact, I'm talking to you from the Washington Post today, where I've come back to work, actually. And so I think that journey has been long and circuitous, and hard to get published, frankly. But I think I feel lucky that it is out in the world and can be told. And like I said, one book on that shelf, it just took a long way to get there. And luckily, after my own elders in my family died, I still, found a lot of open doors through other people who were willing to share what they knew in their corners of expertise.
Sure. So let me ask, I know many of you said you've been to Hawaii and actually been to Hana. What questions might you have for Sarah? Any thoughts, any questions about Sarah or her journey?
I have a question.
Yes.
I've never been there. My niece lives there.
Okay, your niece lives there.
Yes.
In Hana or in Hawaii?
In that island.
Okay, on Maui.
Yeah, and I was wondering how it was when they had the fire, because she was on one end of the island, and the other island, she was afraid to get off the island in a way.
Yeah, so
I just wondered what.
your niece, where on Maui? Do you know where your niece
She lived
lives?
way on the other side,
Oh,
where it showed, when you showed the picture of the map.
yeah. She lives near the Hana side or the Lahaina
I
side?
think it's on it begins with an L.
Lahaina?
Yeah.
Probably Lahaina.
She lives near there.
So she's safe though, thankfully.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. She said her niece lives there. Do you have any thoughts, Sarah? I know that's on a lot of people's minds. How is Maui? How is Lahaina doing? Any thoughts?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I follow a lot of the developments that have been happening since the fires. I still have a lot of family in Hana, in Kula, in Wailuku, in Kihei, across the island. I didn't have family members living in Lahaina at the time, but unfortunately, the recovery has been slow. The real estate costs and the building costs are high. They're starting to rebuild. I was just there a couple of times this year, and you can see a lot of construction going on, a lot of activity. But I think the more painful part is that it forced the whole island to reckon with an uncomfortable truth, which is, who does this island really serve? Are we here to serve our local people, or are we here to serve just tourists? And so that has been a very bitter pill to swallow, because what they realized is when you displace 1,000 people from their homes because of fire, and it's an island, you either have to find a place for those people to live somewhere else, or they have to leave the island, right? It's not like California where you just move to another county. And the difficult thing is that there are enough homes for people who lost their homes in the fire to live in, but they're not for local people, they're for tourists, and they're too expensive. And so 20% of the housing stock on Maui, which is an incredibly high amount for any community, is just for tourists. Meaning it costs $500 a night, and you can do the math on what that looks like for monthly rent. It's not really, and then fewer tourists are coming because I think of this discomfort. And so as a result, you have a real unfortunate situation when now you have a lot of those tourist condos and homes empty, and then people displaced,
Sure.
living on couches and living with other family members, and feeling the pain of, waiting to rebuild, waiting to get that housing assistance. And so as a result, a lot of people have left, and the people who are left, they're going to, there's going to be fewer and fewer of them that can still remain because of the high cost of housing.
Yeah, I know Honolulu is on a different island, it's on Oahu, but I know the city of Honolulu has stopped giving Airbnb licenses for exactly
Yeah.
that reason, because Airbnb just forces the price of land, the price of houses way up. What other questions might you have for Sarah? Yes.
As a fellow Hawaiian,
Okay, a fellow Hawaiian. Yes.
living mostly on the mainland, what type of things are you doing to help your children still maintain their Hawaiian culture, and do you feel that that's been successful?
Oh, that's. Did you hear that? Did you hear that question?
I did.
Oh, what a
Thank
wonderful
you.
question! Because there's just a whole lot in here about hula lessons and the Kamehameha schools, and Sarah, go ahead and make some comments. There's a tremendous amount in this book about exactly that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because that's pretty much what I wrestled with in this book is, how can I really do anything about this? Even if we solved the land problem, it didn't solve it for the future, right? Because here I am 5,000 miles away and raising my children 5,000 miles away. And I had given my children Hawaiian middle names, like my middle name. And it forced this real crisis of identity. I didn't want them to be Hawaiian name only, and I didn't myself feel that way. So I realized in the middle of all this that I did need to do something differently with my life. And so my solution was I started dancing hula at age 40. I learned as a kid, with my grandmother, and when she passed away, as you know, a lot of those traditions go away with the people who teach them. And so I founded Halau, a community that is really a hula school in a way, but a cultural group that meets regularly. There's a few of them actually in Washington, D.C. A lot of people here were in the military or have ties here or worked here for various reasons. And when I walked in, it was like a wonderful community that felt familiar, that looked familiar, that brought a potluck of food that was from Hawaii every week. And so that was my way of bringing my children. We learned hula together. I sent them to Kamehameha schools for the summer. And I felt like I needed to, be a mother in all the ways. And part of that is that kuleana to fulfill their cultural learning.
So I know that you have a meeting you have to get to that you get called to. I'm sorry we can't spend more time, but I am very, very grateful that you took the time to be here with us. So.
Oh, I'm grateful to you, Roger, and all the aloha you have for this book and this story. And I hope you all enjoy it. If you're curious, love Hawaii, curious about Hawaii, want to know it on a different level, I think this is the book for you. So hope you enjoy.
Great.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have fun at your budget meeting.
Yes, I have to now do my other job. Aloha.
Aloha. All right, I'm going to leave Zoom. I think there's no reason to stay here. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint presentation and try and figure out where I'm at. Just talk very briefly. In fact, let me just read. Well, let me start with one piece. I love this. She says, "I got hit by the journalism bug, as we say in the business, in high school. Once I realized that there were careers where people could write news stories every day and get paid for it, sounded like a really great gig." Neither of my parents were writers, but at an early age, I loved reading the newspaper and debating political issues. I loved that some news stories of corrupt politicians, of street gang drama, of unlikely heroes were more fascinating than fiction, and I loved that journalism felt purposeful. So beyond that, let me just read to you, this is actually from her website. This is the most current information. Sarah Keolani Gu is a journalist and senior news executive who has led several national news organizations, including Axios, NPR, and the Washington Post. She's now serving as president of the Creator Network at the Washington Post, a new business focused on supporting and launching new independent social media and newsletter content creators. She formerly served as editor-in-chief at Axios, where she launched the company's editorial expansion into national and local newsletters live podcasts, and live journalism. Before Axios, she led online audience growth as a managing editor at NPR, overseeing the newsroom's digital news operation. Gu started her career as a reporter at the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal. Her credentials as a journalist are amazing. In fact, she tells the story that when she first got offered a job, a full-time job at age 24, at I think it was the Wall Street Journal perhaps, she felt that she had really won the lottery because so many of her professors and mentors had spent years trying to climb that journalism ladder. So at age 24, she got and she's been in the Washington, D.C. area ever since, as it says here, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, NPR, and Axios. So enough about her. We've talked about her ancestral journey. And like I say, the book goes into a great deal of much more detail about how she found all the records and with Uncle Take and wonderful stories about her grandmother and grandfather. And so I would encourage you to read the book just for more information and all the stories about her children and how she tried to make sure that they had some kind of culture. Now, her children are now in probably high school, maybe even college, and so when they were 9 and 10, going to hula classes with mom was not a painful experience. But now that they're in high school, maybe in college, going back to hula lessons, not so much. But she is determined. As she said, she gave each one of them a Hawaiian middle name so they could remember their culture. One of the challenges, and we'll talk a little bit more about this. I was playing a half an hour with Sarah, so now I've got a lot more time to just sort of talk. The 90 acres, a big chunk of that, and I'm not really sure if this was an extra piece, but that Pilani Hale, the heiau, the family has granted that, has given that to a trust, and they have now, she said, when she first saw the property when she was 9 years old, it was overgrown and falling apart, but they've deeded it to a trust, and it is now, you'll see pictures later, it is now open to the public, and it is a national park. So that's thanks to the Kahanu family for doing that. The rest of the acres, and I think she mentioned 80 acres maybe owned by her. Her father, her grandmother owned it, given it to her 7 children. Well, now those 7 children are wrestling with, what do you do with that 80 acres? The intention was when her grandmother gave the property to the children, the intention was to leave it in its natural state for future generations, so that it could remain, truly the real Hawaii. But that becomes more and more difficult because there's 7 in that next generation, her father and his siblings. But there's 20 or 30 cousins that Sarah is now dealing with and trying to figure out what do they do with those other acres, and how do they divide it up? So that's an ongoing story. The story that's not ongoing is the heiau, because that has been given to a trust and it is now taken care of and open to the public. So let me then jump to there's the Pi'ilani Hale heiau. It is enormous, and you can imagine its size. Those are palm trees on the top of it. I mean, this is an enormous, and like I say, it is certainly the largest heiau on Maui, and some have said it may be the largest heiau in all of Polynesia. So the other thing that Sarah wanted to talk about, and this is related to what do they do with this piece of property? Of the 990 acres that was originally given to Kahanu, it was originally divided into 3 pieces because he had 3 children, I guess, 330 acres each, and each of those has been divided up. And many of the families have no connection. As Sarah said, 65% of Native Hawaiians no longer live in Hawaii because they can't afford it. So many of those acres, those 990 acres, ended up in the hands of people who had lived their entire life on the mainland and had really no connection to Hawaii other than they owned a valuable piece of property on Hana. And what do you do with that? And unfortunately, lots of it got sold. But I want to talk, because this is a big part of the book, and for me, a big part of the tragedy of Hawaii, because as we all know, the tragedy of Native Americans on the continent, we don't know as much about the tragedy of the Native Hawaiians. In 1778, a couple of years after the rebellious Americans had declared their independence from Britain, 2 British ships, the Discovery and the Resolution, sailed to the Hawaiian Islands. Aboard was an explorer, Captain James Cook, who arrived while on a mission to try to find a mythical northwest passage between Europe and Asia that explorers hoped would expedite commerce. The Discovery and the Resolution were only the first of many, many ships that soon followed, not only from England, but France, the Netherlands, and America. And the Hawaiian people, their culture, their society, their population would be devastated. First, the diseases would come. Cook's own records from his first trip indicated he knew his men aboard his ships had venereal diseases, and he worried that their arrival infected Hawaiians. They did. And there was more to come: smallpox, syphilis, tuberculosis, leprosy, and all the others. Just as they had ravaged the Hawaiians' native cousins in America a century before. By one estimate, 22 years after Cook's visit, as more foreign ships arrived to discover the bounty of the island, nearly half the native Hawaiian population died from foreign diseases to which they had no immunity. To me, the land transactions of my family hold a bigger story about Native Hawaiians that was not too different from other Native American groups whose land had been lost with the arrival of white men, who showed up unannounced, introduced land ownership and foreign rules, and then took homes and natural resources from under the natives. The Mahele that I mentioned was Kamehameha III's attempt to make sure that Hawaiian land stayed in the hands of Native Hawaiians. But as you also realize, even on the 990 acres given to Sarah's family, most of that has been taken away from Native Hawaiians. That's why she's so desperate to try and find a way to keep this one piece of land that they own still in the hand of Native Hawaiians. I'd read about those stories in history books in school about Native tribes, but not about Hawaii. Why didn't people know what happened to Hawaiian Native people? Its old ahupua'a system of land and tenure, and how its people lost their land once it got flipped upside down. Once again, I found myself gobsmacked by discovering the truth about my family's land and how it connected to a larger story about the Native Hawaiian people. Why didn't our story exist? Why wasn't it part of our larger collective? Where is the outrage? As a side note, a number of years ago, I belonged to this group called the Geneva Learners, and we heard a lecture from a Native American who talked about the tragedy of Native Americans and how they were pushed across the continent to places that were worthless, and all the valuable land that they were on got taken away from them. And at the end of his presentation, I asked him, I said, is there a relationship here to what happened here to what happened to the Native Hawaiians? And he said a very interesting thing to me. He said it was worse in Hawaii. I said, why? He said there was nowhere to push them. There was nowhere to push them. Oh my. In the 1800s, Westerners constantly predicted when the entire Hawaiian race would be gone from the planet. Indeed, just 20,000 Native Hawaiians were left by 1920. By most recent data analysis estimates, the Hawaiian population was around 680,000 when Captain Cook first arrived to document the Hawaiian people's existence to the outside world. Only 7% of the Hawaiian population remained within 100 years of foreigners arriving on the islands. This is back to Lili Kala, the professor at the University of Hawaii who's an expert in Hawaiian history. Sarah asked her one question. She says, why do you think the Mahele have been so disastrous for Hawaiians? Before the Mahele, the Great Mahele, the distribution, Hawaiians didn't own land. So when they were given land, suddenly they had to deal with things that they knew nothing about. They had to deal with taxes, they had to deal with zoning, they had to do with all kinds of things they knew nothing about. So it was very easy for people from the West who knew about all of those things to simply come and take their land away from them in so many ways. Not that it's happening anymore. Did I mention Zuckerberg? No, I didn't mention Zuckerberg. Never mind. Because he's bought huge pieces of land in Kauai. In any event, so her response when Sarah said, why do you think the Mahele have been so disastrous for Hawaiians? I love this. She said, Hawaiians, we're bad at capitalism, she said. I don't think fundamentally anybody in the world should own land. I think that land is like an ancestor. So when we buy and sell land, it's like selling your grandmother. What happened is, as we can see in America, people have made huge, vast fortunes off of taking and selling native land, basically everywhere across America. And those who are extremely rich today keep making themselves richer by charging for land that everybody else lives on. Whether it's rent or mortgage, we can't afford to live on our own land. We're ocean people. We're lucky if 1% of us can afford to live on the ocean. So capitalism is really bad for everybody, but it's especially bad for Hawaiians because we believe in sharing resources, in feeding people. Aina, that's Hawaiian for land, is that which provides and feeds. Native Hawaiians are at or near the bottom rung of society in their homeland. And they were just but they were just the first, this is Native Hawaiians, were just the first to be squeezed out. Today, most local people, both working class and college educated, who live in Hawaii, are feeling it near impossible to make a decent living, afford housing, and save money to get ahead. It's where the American dream is broken, not just a struggle to achieve, but totally out of reach. It's an economy where a gallon of milk costs $9, but the minimum wage is only recently raised to $14 an hour. No wonder there's an acute shortage of teachers, medical professionals, and other essential workers. They simply can't make it work. No wonder there are now more people of Native Hawaiian descent, 53% of the 680,000 living outside of Hawaii than in Hawaii. They see that the only way to get ahead is to leave. Let me jump back. We can talk more about that. We have some time for some, and I've got some final thoughts for the last few minutes. But what are the thoughts or questions? Many of you have been to Hawaii. Many of you said you've been to Hana. What are your thoughts? Not just questions, but what are your thoughts about all of this and Sarah's work? Anybody? Yes.
In her book, I think you should talk about the Hawaiian Renaissance a little bit.
The Hawaiian Renaissance. Meaning?
So, like in my father's time, he was born in the 30s, and my grandparents' time as well. Hawaiians were really pushed down, and but since the 70s, there's been a renaissance with the music, the Hawaiian language, the hokulea,
yes,
hula with the Merry Monarch. There's a lot of things going on. It's very complicated. There's still a lot of.
When you said Renaissance, I thought you meant that suddenly there was a lot of riches available to Hawaiians, and that Renaissance has yet to take place. But yes, the missionaries that came to Hawaii after Cook essentially outlawed Hawaiian culture, right? I mean, they were savages, and their culture was savage culture, so it's literally outlawed. I mean, the hula, Hawaiian music, all of that stuff was nearly lost. But as she said, I'm sorry, your name? Anne. As Anne said, in the 70s, there was a renaissance, a resurgence of Hawaiian culture. And it actually started, she mentioned the Merry Monarch. Just to go back a little bit to Hawaiian history. King Kalakaua was the last king of Hawaii. He died in 1891. He died in 1891. And his sister Liliuokalani became queen. And 4 years later, she was imprisoned, house arrest, and forced to abdicate to basically the sugar producers and the wealthy landowners in Hawaii. And so that started, and Kalakaua was a lover. He in the late 1800s, he tried to bring back the Hawaiian culture and began that. It became much more resurgent in the 1970s, but even in the 1880s, King Kalakaua, he was referred to as the Merry Monarch because he loved the Hawaiian culture. He loved hula. He loved the music. He even wrote music himself, as did his wife Queen Kapi'olani. So he tried to bring it back. He was called the Merry Monarch. As a result of that, now there is on the Big Island every April there's a 3-day hula festival called the Merry Monarch Festival, named after King Kalakaua. And it's wonderful. My wife and I were there once, and I'm eager to go back again. 3 days of Sarah referred to halaus. That is a troupe of hula dancers with a kuma, which is a teacher of hula. There are halaus from all over the world, mostly from Polynesia, that come to the Merry Monarch Festival, and they compete for a very prestigious award as the best halau in the world. And it is just extraordinary for 3 days to listen to this music and see this incredible dancing. So there has been a resurgence. And to the point now where I'm convinced that Hawaiian culture will not disappear. It will survive. Unfortunately, what will not survive probably are the native Hawaiians, which is really, really quite sad. Any other thoughts or questions?
I just want to bring up.
Yes.
About the language.
Yes, the
Hawaiian
language.
language. In the early 70s, there were only 2,000 people left that spoke Hawaiian as their native language. But they started Hawaiian preschool. Now you can go from preschool all the way to get a PhD in the Hawaiian language.
Yes.
Because of that, Hawaiians became very literate very quickly. There's all these Hawaiian newspapers and different things that were written in Hawaiian, so now we have people that can translate those things.
Yes.
And so that alone is reviving our culture.
Yeah. Did you all hear basically what she had to say? And I think that's all wonderful, and I think that's really very positive things. Yes, the Kamehameha schools, which were started by same woman who started the Bishop Museum. Kamehameha schools are, this gets really crazy. Kamehameha schools, you have to have native Hawaiian blood in order to go to the Kamehameha schools. And you have to be able to prove that you have native Hawaiian blood. I heard recently there's somebody in Virginia who is trying to, is issued or filed a lawsuit against the Kamehameha schools for discrimination. In any event, but yes, they're now in Kamehameha schools. They teach the Hawaiian language, and there is Hawaiian language taught in many of the schools now in Hawaii, which is terrific. Absolutely.
How many libraries do they have on Maui?
How many libraries do they have?
No, just on Maui.
Just on Maui? I really don't know. I mean, there's
My niece lives there.
Yeah.
I want to get a book for her, and I want to get one for myself too.
Well, I do have, I had 5, I now have 4. Let me jump ahead for just a moment here.
I was just curious about that.
Let me answer your question in just a second. This is the Kahanu Gardens, which is the heiau which was given to this trust and has now been turned into a public space. The interesting thing is that I first found out about this book because I subscribed to Axios, and Sarah was working for Axios, and they announced this book just 6 months ago or something. It's fairly new, and I bought it immediately, and I sent an email to Sarah. I found her contact information to tell her how much I loved her book. It turns out that about 2 months ago, she was doing, right after the book came out, a book tour in Hawaii. So she and her family came from Washington to Hawaii to do a book tour. And Judy and I were there at the same time. And so I was able to, that's where I was able to meet Sarah and sign her book. And then I eventually I have 5 copies of her book that I paid $30 for, and if somebody would like one, all I want is my $30 back. But they're all signed by Sarah, so if you want a book signed by Sarah, and there we are. And that's Sarah with her family. The oldest daughter there, I think, is a stepdaughter. I think it's her husband's daughter from a previous marriage, perhaps. The 2 younger ones are are Sarah's children. Your question was about, so I have a few books here, but it's available on Amazon. I mean, it's easy to get. And if it's in the libraries, I don't know. And how many libraries are on Maui, I don't know. I mean, there's a number of cities on Maui, and I guess each one of them has a library. How
Must
many?
be books too, but not one like that.
Yeah, this is really a wonderful book, as you might guess. Any other thoughts or questions? Let me leave you with a couple of final thoughts, because my last slide here before I got to all of these was kuleana, which is responsibility. So let me read to you. I love this piece. It's sort of in the middle of her book, but I love this. It says, it made me think about what's missing in American culture that I felt so drawn to, called upon, really, in the Hawaiian culture. What's missing is a sense of generational rootedness. In Hawaiian culture, I see myself in a line where uphill I see and honor all the generations that have come before, and downhill I see all the generations yet to come. My life and time here is not just about where I stand, but also how I stand. It's about the recognition that there's much more in life that I owe to those who have come before me and to those who come after me. It's not just what I do, what I accomplish, what I earn, what success I have, but what I honor. Once I realized this and saw myself in this line, it centered me. I was more balanced on that hill. I had found a steady foundation to understand my purpose beyond whatever career purpose I set out for myself and spent years of my life striving toward. This purpose was entirely different and was about the important purpose as a daughter, as a granddaughter, as a mother, as a cousin, as an auntie, and so on. I have a connection to a place that is tied to my family. It's called me back to Hawaii. It's called me back very specifically to a place of my grandma's birth, to my great-grandma's birth. That call was loud and clear. I've been called back to the land, to understand its story. Now my job is to figure out how to ensure that that call endured for future generations beyond my life. So, I have as some of you know, a very personal connection to Hawaii. It's my wife's grandparents. Not long after the Mahele, in the mid-1800s, my wife's great-grandfather, Hiduk Sum, emigrated from China to Hawaii. And these two, this is Quinyoung He and his wife, I'm sorry, forgotten, because we know them as Popo and Gungun. That's Chinese for grandma and grandpa. That's all I've ever known them as, is Popo and Gungun. It turns out that Gungun, the father, was an engineer. Is the son of Hiduk Sum. He was an engineer in Hawaii and did some amazing engineering. If you're familiar with the Pali Highway and the Pali Tunnel, he helped engineer the Pali Tunnel. And I'm told that he helped engineer many other things all across the islands. So he was fairly well known. But the other thing he did in 1951 is he built this home. And it's been in the family ever since. 3 years ago, when my mother-in-law passed away, my wife has 3 siblings, and we negotiated to buy it from them. And so we now own this house in Hawaii, and obviously spend a lot more time there. But there's a range of emotions. First of all, I really feel some sense. My children are just beyond excited that they will someday own the home that was built by their great-grandfather and has been in the family since 1951. So there is that sense of connectedness and rootedness to both past generations. In the Asian tradition, you may know that visiting ancestral graves is very, very important. And as I joke, last time we were there, my wife and I did the graveyard tour, or the graveyard shift. We visited the grave sites of Hiduksum, the original relative great-grandfather who came from Hawaii, and of Popo and Gungum. And my parents, my in-laws, are both buried at Punch Bowl. My father was career military. We go visit their grave, put flowers in their grave, almost every week when we're there in Hawaii. It's very, very important. So, although I will say the joke I tell about this house is it was built in 1951, and if you know what I mean, I was also built in 1951. So the question is, which one of us has survived the best? Well, let me just say it very briefly. We both needed a lot of work. It needed to be tended for termites, and I did not, so I win that battle. The other thing that's interesting about this house, it is on the hillside. If you know where the University of Hawaii is at Manoa, it's built on the hillside right above the university. And if you stand on the front porch and look south, that's the view. Diamond Head and Waikiki Beach. It's tough duty, but I'm taking one for the team. But I also the other range of emotions is that we're not native Hawaiians. Neither are any of my wife's ancestors. They're all from China. And so in some sense, we too have taken land from the native Hawaiians, right? And so I have this whole range of emotions about, when Sarah says, am I a Hawaiian or am I just a visitor? And who am I? So all that rages on inside of me. Caretaker. Well, we certainly have history. My wife's great-grandfather, Hiduksum, arrived in the 1800s, and the family's been there ever since. They're not native Hawaiians, but they've been there for a long, long time, and have invested a tremendous amount in the islands. You were going to say something?
Basically, the same principle that I was going to offer, because I take part in the native gardening, and there is not a native plant for Hawaii. Because everything has been brought there.
Yeah.
Because they thought it was a good place to cultivate it.
Yes,
and,
right.
So I think I wanted to ask you about the culture itself, and what is really deemed as I am a native of Hawaii.
I don't have a good answer for what really is Hawaiian culture. I participate as much as I can. And I've read a tremendous amount about the history of Hawaii.
The stream from Polynesia is really stronger than anything,
Right. Yeah. It's one of the Polynesian islands, and so, and it is the only piece. It's the piece of land that is farthest from any other continent. Hawaii is farther from any other continent than any other piece of land in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, for that matter. Any other thoughts or questions for me before we part? Yes.
Has your family been able to solve the tax issue?
Oh, thank you. The tax issue. Yes, there was, and it's a fairly long, complicated story. There was a piece of legislation in Hana, thanks to a native Hawaiian who got elected to the local legislature. There was a piece of legislation several years ago that was passed that allowed people to apply for tax relief for whatever reason. They applied and were rejected. But then 2 or 3 years later, just a year or so ago, they did get unannounced, they got letters saying they were reducing the taxes back to a few $100s a year. But as Sarah says in the book, it's temporary. Who knows how long that's going to last. They have a small trust that they can use to pay that. But then, the question is, what's going to happen? And as I said, Sarah's got many, many cousins. How are they all going to decide what happens to that 80 or 90 acres? It's very, very difficult. The home that we own, I have a son who probably will never have any children, and a daughter who's hoping to have children, and so, she's looking forward to passing the home along to, but 2 or 3 or 4 generations from then, if there's many, many, what happens even to our small piece of property? Who knows? Who knows? Other thoughts or questions? If not, what's meaningful to me in this book is the title, Kuleana, Responsibility. What is our There was an educator in the 1970s by the name of Neil Postman who said, children are the living messages we send to a future that we won't see. And all of that is, so my ancestors were sending messages to their children and to me that they wanted lived into the world through me, and I questioned what were those? And what messages am I trying to send through my children, and if I have them, grandchildren, into the future that I won't see. I have told my daughter that if she gives me grandchildren, they better be great, because I will never have great-grandchildren. Anything else? If not, I thank you all very much. Becky, I know that I cut you off and you didn't get to do any kind of an introduction, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger. He's done many programs over the years and was a dear friend of my father's, and
Lee Moorhead, oh my head.
If any of you are interested in getting on my email list and getting my monthly notices about upcoming programs, I have a green clipboard back there. Kristen, our library connection here, is holding it, and just please sign up on the list. Next month, November, is Batavia author Marnie Mamica is going to be here with her children's book, and her artist who does all the illustrations, so we hope that you might come. And this is their third and final book of this nature series. It's just wonderful, and Marnie's such a great presenter, so I hope you'll tell friends, and I'll be emailing those on my list a reminder. So thank you, and thanks to the Batavia Library, and for Barb, who's doing the videotaping. Just a reminder that she's representing BATV, and we send the BATV will be posting the video of this on the YouTube channel, their YouTube channel, and I always post a link to it on the Books Between Bites website. So in another week or two, you'll be able to find the recording of this program and past programs. So thank you again for coming, and a big thank you to Roger. Thank you so much.
Sweet